If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's Golden Age, with a special emphasis on their lives behind the scenes. I am your host, Erin Carlson. Welcome back to our ongoing journey through the life of a Hollywood icon, Miss Judy Garland. This is part 3 of Judy's story, so please make sure to go back and listen to parts 1 and 2 first if you haven't already. We talked about Judy's childhood and her first few years as a contracted Hollywood actress, and we talked about her first marriage and the beginning signs of her mental health challenges. I said at the end of our last episode that we might be able to wrap up Judy's story here in part 3. Well, I should have known better. There will be one more segment after this episode, but that will be it, I promise. By that time, we will be ready for something a little more refreshing and happy. Lots of heartbreak and sadness in Judy Garland's story. But I'm glad we're shining a light on everything she went through. You see a lot of things said about her behavior on sets, and I think it's important we know why some of those behaviors happened in the first place. Judy did not choose her own path, and by the time she realized how manipulated she'd been in the direction her life went, it was too late to turn around. Let's get back into her story. We left off in the beginning of 1943, with Judy's mother and husband forcing her to terminate the pregnancy that she wanted so badly, and the ultimate ending of her marriage in its aftermath. Judy was 20 years old. I'm going to talk about what came next in Judy's personal life, but first I have to tell you about her devotion to her country and her commitment to the war effort during World War II. Many Hollywood stars stepped up to help the war effort at home, and some famous Hollywood men even joined the military to fight for their country, usually at the disapproval of their studio. Judy's studio, MGM, didn't push her into her work for the war effort. She pushed herself. She felt a deep patriotic duty to do what she could to help morale and the war effort in the U.S. She participated in war bond tours, and she visited military hospitals to visit sick and wounded troops. She entertained at the Hollywood Canteen and appeared on many radio programs aimed for the troops. Judy Garland put her energy into these efforts, not because her studio urged her to, but because she felt in her heart she needed to. When she visited troops in the hospitals, she gave them all of her focus and attention. Judy Garland had a warm and sincere heart. As for Judy's love life, she always felt as though she needed a man on her arm. She needed that security and love and feeling of being desired. "A woman is incomplete when she's not in love," she once said. So as her marriage with David Rose crumbled in late 1942, she immediately set her sights on another man. A man a little better known to the public. One of the biggest stars in Hollywood, in fact. Tyrone Power. To Judy's delight, Tyrone had seen Judy's first film where she played a mature woman, not a teenage girl, For Me and My Gal. And he had been raving to everyone he encountered at how remarkable she was. As he told her these things at the Hollywood party they met at, Judy fell almost instantly in love. Most of America was head over heels in love with Tyrone Power. There was one little issue, though. He was married to French actress Annabella at this time, and Judy was technically still married as well. Both Judy Garland and Tyrone Power felt an intense connection to one another that neither had ever felt before, and they simply couldn't walk away. Before long, they were engaged in an impassioned love affair. Something Judy didn't keep very quiet, and something the suits in MGM's executive building were not happy about. Tyrone Power loved Judy, but he wasn't willing to give up on his marriage for her. Not so soon into their affair, at least. To add even more cracks to Judy's heart, Tyrone enlisted in the U.S. Marines to serve during the war, not long after their affair began. In just a few months' time, Judy had been forced to terminate her pregnancy, had separated from her husband, had fallen in love with a new man and been devastated by the fact that he wouldn't leave his wife for her, and then watched him set off to war. She was in emotional ruins, and that became apparent loud and clear when she collapsed on the set of Girl Crazy at the end of January 1943. The studio had slimmed Judy's weight down to 110 pounds, which they were content with. But by the time of her collapse, she weighed only 94 pounds. Judy was only 4'11". She was tiny, but that is still alarmingly thin. She was distraught and she was struggling. In the end, Annabella was not yet willing to grant a divorce to Tyrone Power so he could start a new life with Judy Garland. And he didn't fight too hard for it. The great love affair of Judy Garland and Tyrone Power was over. Judy was still very young. She was only 20 years old when she fell in love with Tyrone Power. Already married and soon to be divorced, and already a huge Hollywood movie star. Needing that intimacy and attachment of a man in her life, Judy Garland quickly fell into the arms of her next beau, MGM super producer Joseph Mankiewicz, the man who had made the initial push to get her in the door at MGM 7 years prior. In Joseph Mankiewicz, Judy saw all of the best qualities of all of the men she'd loved before, perfectly combined to make one perfect man. And in Judy, Joe saw something he'd never seen in a woman before. He was known to understand women more than just about anyone in Hollywood. He listened and respected women, it is said, and learned what made them tick. He appreciated the women in his life for more than just their bodies, which was usually not the case in old Hollywood. Although he was known to understand and appreciate the inner workings of the female mind, with Judy, it wasn't so easy. He found her to be much more complex than any other woman he'd known. He said, quote, "You can write down everything Lana Turner ever thought and felt and meant, and then put the pencil down. That's it, a closed book. But I don't think anybody's going to close the book on Judy Garland," end quote. Judy was a mystery to Joe, and he was mesmerized by her. But his love for her didn't completely line up with her love for him. Judy Garland fell hard and she fell fast when it came to the men in her life. She needed that love, that affection and acceptance. And she attached herself to it tightly the second she received a hint of it from a man. But Joseph Mankiewicz later said of his love for Judy, quote, "I wasn't in love that way. I was in love, and I know this is a terrible analogy. The way you love an animal, a pet." End quote. Yikes. He loved Judy, but it was his curiosity of the complexity that made her up that was the powerful force in their affair to him. To complicate matters, Joe was married with 2 small children, and his wife was in a mental health facility at the time their affair began. Joseph Mankiewicz may not have considered Judy Garland the great love of his life, but he did love her and he did respect her. And most importantly, he wanted to protect her from the negative forces at MGM and from her own mother. He had had a front row seat of the control and manipulation put upon Judy during her time at MGM, and he wanted to shield her from it any way he could. He knew she needed more than protection, though. He knew she needed to discover herself and gain the confidence to make her own choices in her life. She had been floating through life without ever being given the chance to know who she was and what she wanted. She jumped from one man to the next in the blink of an eye, looking for acceptance from someone else. She was never given the chance to just sit with her feelings and feel confident with her own self. And by the time she was an adult, she was probably too scared to try. Jo knew she needed to be able to find that acceptance of herself for herself. She needed to learn how to respect herself, her boundaries, her heart, and the big decisions that determined her life's trajectory. She needed therapy. Joseph Mankiewicz did set Judy up with a therapist, one of the very best in Los Angeles, and things did start out very promising. But when Judy's mother, Ethel, found out that her daughter was seeing a therapist, she marched right into Louis B. Mayer's office and tattled to him. And together, they set out to put an immediate stop to it. Because they knew that inside the walls of that therapist's office, certain things about them would be spoken. And the therapist could ruin every ounce of grooming they'd put into Judy, and he could take away every ounce of control they had over her. They were both furious at Joseph Mankiewicz for being the one to set up Judy with therapy. And there were a couple of very heated conversations with him to put an end to it now. But he refused. He knew she needed it badly. So Joseph Mankiewicz left MGM. He was one of the most important figures the studio had, but he chose his devotion into helping and protecting Judy over his career at MGM. I read accounts both that he was fired and that he left on his own will, but either way, he left. He went on to greatness at 20th Century Fox, but the great promise of Judy's therapy wasn't so lucrative. It all boiled down, I think, to her therapist being the wrong fit for her. Almost all, if not all, therapists in 1940s America were men, usually rigid men. And what Judy really probably needed was a compassionate female therapist who could relate to her more. Instead, she had an old, austere German man who was a strict follower of Sigmund Freud's psychological theories and practices. Before long, Judy began skipping her sessions, and when she did show up, she wouldn't be truthful with her therapist. She did indeed need therapy desperately, but she had so many obstacles in her way. The ability to have a good fit for her in therapy, and, of course, her mother and her boss. They were going to do everything they could to keep Judy from understanding just how controlled and manipulated her life was and had always been. Judy needed help. Maybe not from that therapist, but she needed help from someone other than her mother and the studio executives at MGM. By the summer of 1943, Judy was turning 21 years old, and she was already exhibiting clear signs of something being terribly wrong. Production of 1943's Girl Crazy and 1944's Meet Me in St. Louis were both greatly affected by Judy being absent so often. She missed 17 days during the production of Girl Crazy, 16 for Meet Me in St. Louis. And the days she was present, she was considerably late. It began the very first day of rehearsal for Meet Me in St. Louis when she was 4 hours late. From then on, there wasn't one day of rehearsal or filming where she was where she needed to be on time. Many days she simply didn't arrive at all. On those days, someone from the production would usually receive a phone call at 4 or 5 in the morning from a Judy who hadn't slept a wink of sleep and was suffering from a terrible headache, or someone close to her calling for her. Sometimes that call never came. Judy just didn't show up. Judy Garland was an incredibly hardworking woman. None of this was her fault at the root of it all. It had all begun when her mother got her addicted on uppers and downers when she was just a child. And then the extra pills piled on by the studio as a teenager and the sexual abuse. Judy was barely sleeping by the time she was 21. The pills had long since lost their magical powers, and her mental health went unsupported in any kind of healthy way. Filming for Meet Me in St. Louis seemed like it would never be completed, between Judy's frequent absences and sickness with some of the other cast. Pneumonia for Mary Astor and Joan Carroll, and influenza for Margaret O'Brien. They finally did pull it together, and what they created was wonderful, despite all the setbacks. Something else unexpected came out of Meet Me in St. Louis. A new romance for Judy. This time with the movie's director, Vincent Minnelli. Judy and Minnelli did not get along well during the first half of the film's production. Not at all. But something shifted once they began spending time outside of the studio at friendly dinners with others. They realized they liked each other, and then they realized they liked each other a lot. By just a few weeks post-filming of Meet Me in St. Louis, Judy and Vincent were living together. It wasn't exactly a smooth romantic transition for Judy, though. First of all, she was really struggling emotionally at this point. Second, she still hung on to her affair with Joe Mankiewicz on and off. And third, she was still legally married to David Rose. Judy and Joe Mankiewicz had a deep, deep bond that they had a really difficult time severing. She wasn't his only relationship outside of his marriage, but she was the most powerful. Here is what he said of his relationship with Judy years later. Quote, "I guess I've had my share of affairs with women. Every year, as I grow older, the memory of what we did and what we went through when we did it grows dimmer and dimmer. That isn't the case with Judy. I remember her as I would remember an emotion, a mood, an emotional experience that is an event." End quote. Judy often referred to Joseph Mankiewicz as the love of her life. Even so, Mankiewicz was not willing to leave his wife. In the end, after Joe and after a brief affair with Orson Welles, Judy landed solely into Vincent Minnelli's arms. And before long, they announced that they were getting married. Judy Garland said "I do" for the second time on June 15, 1945, 5 days after her 23rd birthday. Louis B. Mayer and the other execs at MGM were far more in favor of this marriage than Judy's first to David Rose, where she was ordered back to the studio just hours after the wedding. This marriage was good for the studio. For this wedding, the newlyweds were awarded with 3 whole months off from MGM. Vincent Minnelli was good for Judy, Mayer thought, for a couple of reasons. First, Judy was clearly unhappy and had previously announced that she would be leaving MGM at the end of her contract in 1947, and that she was going to go work on Broadway. If she was married to an MGM director, she would likely stay in LA and stay at MGM. More importantly, they thought Vincent Minnelli would help Judy stay on a good emotional path, keep her in line. These men completely ignored the fact that their years of pill pushing and sexual abuse contributed greatly to the struggles Judy was dealing with. That the line they were so worried she was falling from was sent wobbling by their own doing. Within 3 months of marrying Vincent Minnelli, Judy learned she was pregnant. Her mother and first husband had forced her to have an abortion with her first pregnancy, so it was difficult for Judy to get too excited right away. Vincent was thrilled, but Judy needed Ethel's approval. Judy was 23 years old, had a successful career, and was on her second marriage. And still, she was programmed to believe that she needed her mother's permission to proceed with any important decisions. So, from their long-term honeymoon in New York, Judy called her mother. "I'm going to have a baby, Mama," she said. "Do you mind?" Ethel didn't mind this time. She, too, was on Team Vincent Minnelli. Many people voiced their surprise at both this marriage and the baby Judy and Vincent had conceived, because Vincent Minnelli was believed to be gay by many people. Most likely he was bisexual. Of course, acceptance and understanding of sexual orientation was very different in the 1940s, so this was considered shocking and scandalous. To add the icing onto the judgy cake everyone was serving up, many people also had a thing or two to say about Vincent Minnelli's physical looks. He wasn't traditionally handsome, and you know what? Judy didn't care. He loved her, and he respected her, and he treated her wonderfully. He was what she needed at that moment. And then he made her a mother. Judy Garland gave birth to her first child on March 12, 1946. Little Liza Minnelli. And happy birthday, Liza Minnelli. She just turned 80 years old last week. By the time Judy went back to work, she was hooked in with a brand new 5-year contract. MGM's wishes had come true. Judy, their moneymaker, was staying. And as a thank you, they doubled her salary. She was now making $6,000 per week. That's $100,000 per week today. And once back to work on her next movie, The Pirate with Gene Kelly and directed by Vincent Minnelli, she instantly regretted signing her life away to the studio for another 5 years. She had stayed off of pills while pregnant, but she was deep back into her reliance on them by the time filming for The Pirate began. She missed more days of filming than any other movie before. And when she did go to work, she was often either in a drowsy sleepwalking daze or extremely rattled and paranoid. She was riddled with anxiety and hated her job. From how she herself shared how she felt during this time, the best way I can explain it is this. Have you ever had a job where you have gut-wrenching dread at the thought of going each day? That you get almost physically sick with dread and anxiety every Sunday evening as the work week approaches? Judy felt that, multiplied by 1,000 every time she was expected to be on set at MGM. Vincent Minnelli found himself in a really difficult place with The Pirate. He had his career to consider, but he also had his wife to consider. He was the director of this movie, and the studio and everyone involved in making it were relying on him, and his responsibility, as they saw it, in keeping his wife in line. By their second anniversary, Judy and Vincent's marriage was pretty much in title only. Like in her first attempt at marital happiness, Judy realized she and her much older husband had little to nothing in common, other than the child they shared and the employer they shared. Judy found affection in the arms of another man, someone completely opposite from her husband, actor Yul Brynner. And Vincent, according to Judy, had found affection in the arms of another man as well. So she learned when she walked in on them in the couple's bedroom. This was a really dark time in Judy's life and her ever-spiraling mental health. It was at this time that she experienced her first real mental breakdown, and gossip columnist Luella Parsons made sure the whole world knew about it. Judy Garland is a very sick girl and has suffered a complete nervous collapse, she reported on July 12, 1947. Judy described her state of mind a bit differently. Desperately and impossibly exhausted. Judy entered a mental health facility outside of town, and then she relocated to a different one on the East Coast. She left before her doctor thought she was ready, but she was ready to go home to her husband and her little girl. And she went right back to work, working with Fred Astaire on Easter Parade, a movie Vincente Minnelli was assigned to direct, but that Judy had requested he be removed from. She didn't think working together was good for their marriage. Judy seemed to be in a much healthier place now, as far as her ability and reliability on the set was concerned. And it's a good thing, because Fred Astaire was very particular about the abilities and stamina of his partners. The duo was so vibrant together, in fact, that MGM immediately paired them up together for the Barkleys of Broadway. But by the time rehearsals got underway, Judy's rejuvenation had worn off, and her mental health was in crisis mode again. She simply wasn't showing up for work again, so she was replaced with Fred's longtime partner, Ginger Rogers. And Judy's contract was suspended without pay. The promise shown in Easter Parade, fresh from her stay in the mental health facility, was nothing but false hope for everyone at the studio and everyone who loved her. Her career wasn't going to soar at all. In reality, her time with MGM was entering its final descent. Judy had a guardian angel to help her heal during this dark time of her life. Her dear friend, actress Sylvia Sidney, and her husband, Carlton Alsop. Sylvia was 12 years older than Judy, and she stepped in like a protective older sister when Judy needed her most. During this time, after Judy's return from the mental health facility in 1947, after a brief time home with Vincent and Liza, Sylvia and Carlton invited Judy to stay in their home, and they nursed her back to health, both emotionally and physically. They provided her with the calm, loving, safe place she needed. A place of no judgment and no criticism. Just a place to heal. Judy had become alarmingly thin again, and within a couple of months, Sylvia and Carlton had helped Judy gain almost 20 desperately needed pounds. Just as quickly as she'd regained the weight and strength she needed for her physical health and nourished and calmed her mind under the care of her dear friends, that strong downward spiral sucked her into the dark hole once again. She was cast in Annie, Get Your Gun, and by the time filming began, she had withered away to an alarming 90 pounds, and her hair was falling out. She was not well. And she was not able to perform or even make it to the studio much of the time, as had happened in past projects. Like the Barkleys of Broadway, Judy Garland was taken out of the role and replaced, and once again suspended. Not only was she suspended during these times, but MGM kept record of every cent her absences cost the studio, and they expected her to repay those losses. Judy Garland was just shy of 27 years old, and she had already lived the despair of 100 lifetimes. Louis B. Mayer was scared for Judy. Most likely, he was more scared about losing the money Judy Garland brought into the studio. Either way, although he was part of the reason she was addicted to drugs and suffering from mental illness in the first place, he wanted to help get her healthy. So he arranged for her to enter a hospital in Boston, and the priorities during that stay became getting by without pills, strengthening her body through 3 healthy and balanced meals each day, and learning how to sleep again naturally. Although Judy had been making a ton of money, she was all but broke by this time, so the studio agreed to pay for her hospital stay. A healthy Judy Garland was good for them. Judy had burned a lot of bridges due to her addiction, but she still had a few good friends in her corner, like Sylvia Sidney and Carlton Alsop. And also her good friend and one-time lover, Frank Sinatra. Frank never abandoned Judy, and during her stay at the Boston hospital, he made sure she knew she wasn't alone. He visited her at least once, but he called her every single day to chat. He kept her room flooded with almost daily gifts, flowers, perfumes, and even a phonograph and records. Judy wasn't confined to the hospital. She was free to come and go or take weekend trips to New York or Cape Cod or wherever she felt. But it sounds like she was committed to her healing and she didn't take these opportunities to seek pills. She knew she needed to heal. Next door to the Peter Bent Bingham Hospital in Boston was a children's hospital, and Judy made visits to the children there part of her daily routine. She was so good with the children, and they adored her. Her presence and attention to them was so strong that the grace and patience with one little girl helped save her from the effects of the abuse she had endured at home. Whatever trauma had occurred in this little girl's life had caused her to become nonverbal. She didn't speak for 2 whole years. Not until Judy Garland showed her love. She spoke to Judy, and she continued to speak after Judy left. The rehabilitation Judy experienced at the Bent Brigham Hospital, she owed almost entirely to the children. The time she spent with them nurtured her soul. I can attest to this as someone who spends every day with young children. I often tell my preschool students that they are my teachers. I am learning love and compassion from them every single day. Children are truly the best therapy. Judy felt amazing after her time in Boston, better than she had in all of her adult life. She turned 27 years old during her time in treatment. She likely could have stayed on the right path, with the right kind of support and encouragement. But she wasn't going to get that inside the gates of MGM. The studio put her right back to work again, casting her again opposite Gene Kelly in the musical Summer Stock. But the MGM execs who claimed to worry about Judy's addiction and even paid for her 3-month treatment to help that addiction, now told her she was too overweight. She wasn't. She was healthy. That healthy diet she had been on at the hospital returned her to what her healthy weight should have been. But MGM wanted her thinner for Summer Stock, so they went right back to their old tricks. The same things they did when they first created Judy's eating disorder as a young teenage girl. She was put on a strict crash diet, near starvation, and the diet pills soon followed. Then the anxiety and disappointment of it all caused Judy to experience terrible migraines and insomnia again. So then she was back relying on sleeping pills. It was like a bad dream that I thought I had put away, Judy recalled. I was in the trap again. The pill use increased, and Judy's mental health dove fast. She was quickly experiencing paranoia and hallucinations on set, and called in sick frequently. Co-stars Gene Kelly and Phil Silvers tried their best to help and support her, but she was again in a really bad place. Gene Kelly even pretended to be sick himself to postpone filming, covering for Judy. And Gene Kelly never called in sick. Many thought the movie would never be completed, but they pulled through. And when it did, it marked the end of Judy's 15-year career with MGM. They were no longer willing to support her or hope that she would be the woman they wanted her to be. She struggled deeply with substance abuse, a life she never chose for herself. But she was the one who had to fight it alone. MGM helped create the monster they saw her as, and now they were done with her. Judy was beyond distraught after she was let go from MGM. So distraught, she locked herself in her bathroom and cut her throat with broken glass. She told Vincente Minnelli she wanted to die. Katharine Hepburn showed up to support her during her time of crisis. Judy was okay, physically, it was just superficial. But the incident somehow got leaked to the press, and they went wild with it and played it out for far worse than it actually was. Headlines like, Judy Garland slashes throat after film row, and Judy Garland cuts throat over lost job. Judy was bedridden and mostly sedated for several days. I don't know if she realized in that immediate aftermath how severely she had been damaged by the studio she now grieved. I'm guessing not. She just felt pure betrayal and failure and deep, deep depression. She had sought acceptance for most of her life, and now she had been thrown out on the street by the studio who vowed to be her family. I do see the studio's side though too. They were in the business of making movies and making a profit, and they needed their actors and actresses to be reliable components in making those movies. When the star of a movie is continually half a day late or doesn't show up at all, that affects a lot of people and it costs the studio a lot of money. I personally blame MGM and Judy's mother Ethel for the problems that caused those absences, but it clearly became more of a problem than I hope they intended. And not many employers would endure that for very long. It's just a really sad situation, saddest of all for Judy. But there was still hope. Maybe not at MGM, but they didn't own the entire entertainment world. In fact, shortly after news broke of the ending of Judy's contract with MGM, she received a telegram from NBC offering her a contract. "Cheer up," it said. "We all love you." And when she felt well enough to take a trip to New York, the fans she encountered everywhere there offered her that kind of love and encouragement too. She was slowly realizing she had a lot of support. MGM may not have been there for her anymore, but there were plenty of people who were. She would need the support of her fans because it was just a few months after that contract was severed with MGM that her marriage to Vincent Minnelli came to an end as well. Their love had never been a deep, passionate one. I think there was a mutual respect, there was support, and there was friendship. At the center of it all was Judy's struggles with addiction and her mental health. It would have put a strain on the strongest of marriages. Vincent Minnelli was devoted to his career with MGM, and now that Judy was no longer part of the MGM family, it created a huge division in their marriage. They had endured a lot of hardship together, and they ultimately decided to go their separate ways. Judy Garland would be entering the year 1951 with a whole new beginning. And she started that whole new beginning with a whole new man. Judy needed a man in her life, so she jumped right from her marriage to Vincent Minnelli immediately into the arms of a man named Sidney Luft. Sid Luft had a couple of gripping nicknames around town: Mr. Wrong and One Punch Luft. And he was also described as a volcano that could erupt at any time. His favorite hobby was getting into bar fights at high-class nightclubs like the Macombo and Ciro's. He was as far removed from Vincent Minnelli as Judy could probably find. Now, with a new exciting relationship to keep her spirits up, Judy had to decide what direction, if any, to take her career. It's easy to forget because of everything she's been through, but she was only 28 years old at this point in her life. She did get offers from a couple of Hollywood studios, and then there was the offer from NBC, and she had opportunities to perform on Broadway. But the opportunity she chose to pursue was a 4-week engagement at the esteemed London Palladium. She was very nervous to perform in front of a live audience again, but she did it, and London loved her. For the show, Judy had put together a musical review of her life in the movies, some of the songs she was most celebrated for. She received so much love from her daily sold-out audiences at the Palladium. She was so well received and beloved in her London engagement that she went on to do engagements in Scotland and Ireland. And she didn't miss a show. She had said for years that she felt like a prisoner at MGM, that she got physically ill every time she had to go to the studio. Now, back on the stage getting that love and acceptance and appreciation she craved so badly, she was on fire. But when she returned to the US, would they love her like the UK had loved her? She wasn't sure, but she was going to try. Well, they did love her. 184 performances over 19 weeks at the Palace Theater in New York. A full house and a long, loud ovation at every single show. Judy's voice did something to people. It held some kind of magic. It was an emotional journey every single night, for the audience and for Judy. She felt alive and she felt loved. It was like breathing again, Judy said. Having people let me know I still meant something to them, that they loved me and still wanted to hear me sing. We are going to leave Judy here for today. I want to leave her in a place of happiness before we conclude her story next week. I promise next week will be our conclusion. It's been worth the long ride though, hasn't it? I just feel like we need to know as many details as possible in the great complex puzzle of Judy Garland's life. Her life mattered, and I for one respect and love her so much more knowing the hell she went through for most of her life. Because when you watch her on the screen, most of the time it's really hard to believe that she was even struggling at all. She did that for us, and it took everything she had to do it. I'll see you guys next week for the rest of Judy Garland's story. Before I go, though, I need to give a very special shout out to a very special friend of the show. Anna, who also supports the show on Patreon, which I appreciate so much, has also supported the show in a much grander way. She has the most impressive collection of books about old Hollywood that I have ever seen. We're talking biographies of pretty much every big Hollywood star from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, plus amazing books about the Big Five studios, fashion design, and all kinds of fun Golden Age information. And guess what? She decided to pass her collection on to me. And she has also shared with me some very special vintage clothing and accessories, and several old Hollywood movie magazines, which is what I use to pull content from for our Patreon cocktail party episodes. These magazines are pure gold. Anna's kindness and generosity is going to save me hundreds of dollars in source material. The books she sent me are absolutely amazing. I am beyond grateful, and it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know Anna a little bit. So, Anna, thank you again so much for your generous heart and for trusting me with your impressive book collection. I appreciate you so much. If you are struggling with mental illness or substance abuse disorder, please seek help. You can text 988, or you can call 988, or you can go to the 988 Lifeline website at 988lifeline.org to chat with a counselor. Judy Garland didn't have the outstanding resources available today, but we do. I'll see you all back here next week for the conclusion of Judy Garland's story. In the meantime, reach for the positive in every day, be kind to everyone you encounter, and have a great rest of your week.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.